So now that we've learned the basics of what an inequality is and how to graph inequalities, we are going to look at some pre-algebra multi-step inequalities. Go ahead and take a minute and go to a new sheet of paper in your math notes, and at the top of your notes, put the title Multi-Step Inequalities. If you understand how to solve equations and how to graph basic inequalities, you already know how to do multi-step inequalities because you combine those two things to do multi-step inequalities. So there's really no notes, no vocabulary that we are going to do with the notes today, but rather we are going to look at several examples together and then separately on how to solve and practice solving these multi-step inequalities. So let's go ahead and get started with a couple examples. As I work out these examples, as always, I'm going to ask that you are listening, watching, and paying attention and not writing. And at the end of solving each problem, I will give you an opportunity to write those examples in your notes. So at this time, your pencils should not be in your hands. So the first example is 7y minus 4 is greater than 24. And you would solve this the exact same way that you would solve an equation. So if it helps, you can just think about this as 7y minus 4 equals 24, at least for the first few steps. So we're going to start by making zero pairs. So we're going to add 4 to both sides. So we have 7y equals 28. And then we're going to divide by 7 to get y by itself. So we have y equals 28 divided by 7 is 4. And then we're going to go back because we don't have an equal sign. We have an inequality. So it's actually y is greater than 4. So again, we have spent so much time on solving equations. So if you understood and did well with solving equations, it's very simple to transition into inequalities because we solve them the same way. The only difference is graphing and remembering if you ever multiply or divide by a negative, you flip that sign, which we didn't have to do in this problem. So then the last step, if you stop here, you are not finished. It is wrong. You have to make sure to show all of the solutions of your inequality by graphing it on a number line. So again, we're just going to do 4 in the middle where we start, and then 1 on each side. We have an open circle because it's not equal to, and y is greater than 4, so we're going to go to the right. So that is our first example. Go ahead and pause the video here and put this example in your notes. All right, so let's look at another example together. This example is several steps, but we did so many problems like this when we did equations. So we're just bringing back what we were doing with equations. We've got 5, open parentheses, x plus 4, close parentheses, minus 8x is less than or equal to 17. So we want to solve and simplify as much as possible everything on the left side before we start making zero pairs. So I'm going to start by using my distributive property, and I'm going to do 5 times x, which is 5x, and 5 times 4, which is 20, minus 8x. We're still not ready to make zero pairs yet because we have 2 terms that are alike, and we can combine our terms. So we have 5x and we have negative 8x, which is negative 3x plus 20 is less than or equal to 17. You can minus 20 from both sides. Now we're making our zero pairs. And we have negative 3x is less than or equal to negative 3. Divide both sides by negative 3. With all of these steps, you get down to this dividing by a negative. Don't forget, this is the new step in inequalities. When you divide or multiply by a negative, you have to flip the sign. So this becomes x is now greater than or equal to, and we have a negative divided by a negative, 1. Kind of ran out of a little bit of room there. I probably started off a little too big, but I've got enough room to squeeze it in. So we're going to go ahead and graph it. And we've got 1, 2, 3. It is equal to, so we're going to do a closed circle. And x is greater than, so we're going to put our answer, or arrow. We're going to make our arrow going to the right. And you can always check this. You can go back up here and plug in the number 2 and solve it. You've got 2 plus 4 is 6. 6 times 5 is 30. And then 8 times 2 is 16. 30 minus 16 is 14. And 14 is less than or equal to 17. So that works. So just remember, you can go back all the way to your original inequality to check it and make sure that you did it correctly. So let's go ahead and pause the video here and copy this into your notes. So I saved the best problem for last because I know how much you guys just adore fractions. So let's do an inequality that has a fraction in it. So we have negative 3x over 8 plus 5/6 is less than or equal to 7/12. And remember, we talked about the strategy when solving multi-step equations, when all of your terms have a fraction, that you can clear the fraction. So the best way to do that is to come up with a common denominator. So you can come over here and you can make a list, or if you just know your multiplication facts, you may be able to look at those 3 numbers and do it. But I'm going to come over here and just make a little list. So 12 times 1 is 12, 12 times 2 is 24, 12 times 3 is 36, and 12 times 4 is 48. So I'm going to stop there for right now. And then I'm going to do my 8s. 8 times 1 is 8. 8 times 2 is 16. 8 times 3 is 24. 8 times 4 is 32. 8 times 5 is 40. 8 times 6 is 48. And then let's do 6. 6, 12, 18. That's 6 times 3. 6 times 4 is 24. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 6 is 36. 6 times 7 is 42. And 6 times 8 is 48. So our common denominator is going to be 48. So we're going to rewrite this problem using the denominator of 48 for each of my terms. So here, what do I multiply 8 by to get 48? 8 times 6. So we're going to multiply the numerator by 6 as well. So we have negative 3 times 6, which is negative 18x. And then 6 times 8 gives me 48. So I'm going to multiply 5 times 8 to get 40. And then 12 times 4 gives me 48. So 7 times 4 gives me 28. Once all of your fractions have the same denominator, that means every single one of those terms are being divided by 48. We can eliminate that by simply multiplying each term by 48. So if I have negative 18x and I'm dividing by 48, and then I multiply by 48, I'm not dividing anything. I'm just left with what I started with, negative 18x. If I have 40 and I'm dividing by 48 and then I multiply by 48, it leaves me with what I started with, 40. If I have 28 and I'm dividing by 48 and then I multiply by 48, it leaves me with 28. So now this is a simpler two-step equation without fractions. So we're going to start by making 0 pairs, and I'm going to minus 40 from both sides. So I'm taking away a larger negative from a positive, so my answer is going to be negative 12. And I think I did that right, so I'm going to count up from 28, 29, 30, plus 10 more is 40. and then I still have the same sign because I haven't divided or multiplied yet by a negative. So I have negative 18x is less than or equal to negative 12. And then I'm going to divide both sides by negative 18. So then I have x. I'm going to flip the sign. Is now greater than or equal to. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. And I actually have a fraction for an answer, which is common when you have fractions in your original problem. So I have 12/18, which can simplify, because both 12 and 18 can be divided by 6, can simplify to 2/3. When I graph that, don't overthink graphing an inequality that's a fraction. You can just graph thirds on your number line. So if this is 2/3, one more third is going to be 1 whole, and one less third is going to be 1/3. You could also graph whole numbers and just say that 2/3 is closer to 1 than it is to 0 and kind of predict where in between 0 and 1 would be 2/3. So there's different ways you can do that. We're going to do a closed circle on 2/3, and x is greater than 2/3, so our arrow is going to go to the right. That's a lot of work, but it's a beautiful math problem right there, guys. Please get this example in your notes. We're going to pause the video and put this example in our notes, and then we're going to do some guided practice problems on our desk. Pause the video now and copy this into your notes. All right, guys, it is your turn. So let's go ahead and get our socks and markers out, and let's try some guided practice problems on our desk. The first problem that I would like for you to try, we're going to start off a little simple and work our way towards some harder ones. Let's try 3k plus 5 is greater than 11. Let's pause the video and give everybody an opportunity to try that on their desk. And then when all or most of you have it, we'll press play and look at the answer. All right, guys, so the first step is to subtract 5, making 0 pairs. There's nothing on the left that we can do to simplify it, so we just jump straight in by making 0 pairs and trying to isolate the variable k on the left side by itself. So then we have 3k is greater than 11 minus 5 is 6. And then we're going to divide both sides by 3. We're not dividing by a negative, so we don't have to flip the inequality on this one. And 6 divided by 3 is 2. And then to graph that, we've got 2, 3, and 1. And we have an open circle, and k is greater than, so our arrow goes to the right. Like I said, I really wanted to start off with a simple one, so hopefully we all knocked that one out of the park. All right, let's step our game up a little bit and try a little bit harder of a problem. So the next problem I have for you guys is negative 8x plus 6 plus 4x is greater than or equal to 14. So pause the video and take a minute to try and solve that one on your desk. So the first step to solving this problem is combining like terms. Remember, we need to simplify before we start making 0 pairs as much as possible on the left side. So we have 2 terms that are alike. We have negative 8x and positive 4x. So that gives us negative 4x plus 6 is greater than or equal to 14. There's nothing else to simplify on the left, so we can start making 0 pairs. We can minus 6 from both sides. So we have negative 4x, and then we have 14 minus 6, which is 8. So negative 4x is greater than or equal to 8. Divide both sides by negative. So we're going to flip the inequality. X is now less than or equal to. And we have a positive divided by a negative, so we have negative 2. And when we graph that, we have negative 2, negative 1, negative 3, We have a closed circle on -2, and x is less than, so we're going to go to the left. All right, guys, let's try another one. That's our second example. All right, guys, so for our third problem, I want you guys to try this one. This is 2z minus, let's do a decimal, 29 and 5/10 is less than or equal to 10 and 5/10. All right, guys, I hope everybody had a chance to try that on their desks. So there's really not a lot of steps to this one. The only one thing that makes this a little bit challenging is simply the fact that I put decimals in it. So we're going to jump right in by making 0 pairs. We're going to do 29.5 and add that to both sides. And it's not even a difficult decimal because we've got 0.5 and 0.5, which makes a whole, and we're adding 10 to it. So 29 plus 10 is 39, and then 0.5 and 0.5 make a whole, so it's 40. Then we're dividing by 2, so z is less than or equal to 20. Graphing that, we've got 20, 21, 19. We've got a closed circle on 20, and z is less than, so our arrow goes to the left. Let's try another one. So our next problem, we're going to try one with fractions. You knew this was coming. So let's do 1/2 plus d over 6 is less than 1/3. And I think it's a little bit easier to find a common denominator for 2, 6, and 3 than the example we did in our notes. So pause the video and take a minute and try this one on your desk. So our common denominator for this problem is 6. So we're going to change all of the fractions to have a denominator of 6. This d over 6 is already 6, so we don't have to multiply anything. We just leave it d over 6. For 2, we multiply 2 times 3. So we're going to multiply 1 times 3 to get 3/6. And then for 3, we multiply by 2 to get 6. So we multiply 1 times 2 to get 2/6. Once all the denominators are the same, we can multiply by the denominator to clear the fraction. So we have 3 plus d is less than 2. We can minus 3 from both sides, making 0 pairs. And we get d is less than -1. So we can graph that. We can do -1, 0, -2. Open circle on -1, and d is less than -1, so our arrow goes to the left. All right, guys, I really hope you're starting to get the hang of this. That's it for today. You guys will continue practicing this tomorrow. I hope this is pretty easy for you, especially if you did really well with equations and you start to see the relationship and how they're solved pretty much the same way.